Tiny glitching Skype.
That is going to be the opening. Forget everything that we said before. That is how we're going to open this episode. Full stop.
Welcome to Brotherhood, a spoiler-filled podcast where we review each episode of Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood. My name is Timothy MacArthur, the taller brother.
And my name is Dylan MacArthur, the older brother.
Today's episode, Beasts of Doubleth.
A slightly inebriated retelling of how Godzilla's underachieving grandchildren invaded Ireland.
I watched that one. It wasn't very good.
So before we begin, I have a little bit of follow-up that I want to give regarding episode 3. You remember episode 3, Timothy?
Oh, the Jared Leto episode?
Yes, that was the Jared Leto episode. Our two biggest complaints for that episode were as follows. Number one, it was redundant. It felt like it was coming in trying to repeat the same function as the first two episodes, but doing it less spectacularly than the previous two. The second complaint was regarding the science versus religion conflict.
Oh my gosh, that was terrible.
It was just bad.
If they're going to make an episode like that, why not first make it good?
Which isn't to say that that is a conflict that can't be done well, but that it probably isn't going to be done well in a shonen. Now, since recording that podcast, I have actually sat down to read a little bit of the manga upon which this show was based.
Was that better?
I wouldn't say that it was better. I would say that it made a lot more sense why the episode was what it was. Because in the original manga, the very first episode is the Jared Leto sequence.
Oh, so that's why they didn't do the Jared Leto one first.
You can imagine being in the writing rooms where they were saying, we've got to have this scene. This is an iconic moment in the whole manga. We have to include it. But we've already started with 2 episodes that are much stronger than this one. But we also want to be faithful. So we're just going to transfer it over as cleanly as we can, changing as little as possible. And as a result, the third episode definitely suffers. The conflict between science and religion is still in there, but I will say that it makes a lot more sense when you haven't already met truth. When you have met truth, it no longer makes any sense at all. And when you look back on it, even in the manga, you do start to think to yourself, okay, well, they said that truth guy is basically the god of this universe. I stand by what I said in the original episode, which is that I suspect we're running into a difference of translation, that whatever word was being translated from the original Japanese into English as God probably means something a little bit different than what it means here in our Western society. And now I'm going to feel bad for having said Western society for the rest of the episode.
Hooray for feeling sorry for ourselves.
As always, we're just going to go through my notes rather than sequentially. My first note is regarding the ever-present gasp that is only ever present in anime. Have you noticed this, Timothy?
Yeah, I think so.
There are lines that will appear in the dialogue that are literally just the character going,
Like a gasp when they receive a revelation, or...
This is something that I didn't really pick up on until I started using clips from episode 11 to fill out our review for that episode. And it is exactly as awkward as it sounds like I'm describing it.
It sounds like more like a noise that you might use when you're offended or something, the way you put it.
Because what they're trying to communicate at this point is that the character is surprised. And how else are you going to communicate that? You could have them say some sort of expression like, oh my goodness, or Wow.
Oh my goodness, gravy.
All of them, including Riza, just shouting, "Oh my goodness, gravy!" waving a white handkerchief. Or you could modify their posture in the animation. You could create a little surprised facial expression, all of which would cost money, I suppose, and all of which would cost time, and all of which run the risk of not really coming through as well as a audible gasp. No matter how awkward the audible gasp may be, I suspect that it's probably going to stay in anime for the rest of anime's history. Now, remind me for a second, what is the teacher's name?
Izumi, I believe it's Izumi Curtis or something.
All right, Izumi and Sig. Okay. Just wanted to make sure I got that. We begin with Izumi declaring to her students that they can no longer be her pupils because they committed the taboo, which makes them unworthy of being her students. Okay, sure. Whatever. They're sent off.
That and they make for very good eyesores. Ah ha ha ha. Get it, pupils? Eyesores. Ah ha 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 ha.
Anyway, Sig meets them at the train station and he says, don't you realize just because you aren't her students anymore doesn't mean that you can't be her equals and still talk to her as equals, which is definitely false because she is still their superior by age, but whatever, it gives us a chance to go back.
Also, I'm like, what is wrong with you, Sig? Do you secretly want them to die? Like, do you want Izumi to kill them, or do you plan on jumping in at the last second to play damage control or something?
I imagine that that's what Sig always thought being a father would be constantly playing damage control.
Probably.
They return back from whence they just left, and they decide that they want to talk to Izumi about the truth.
And then Izumi throws a knife at Ed.
Yeah, this is in between episode 12 and episode 13, which we're recording right now. I spent a fair bit of time learning and sort of catching up to speed a little bit with what anime is and how it works, because as established in the first episode, anime is not really my thing. And one of the things that I learned about is the genre of shonen, which happens to be the genre in which Full Metal Alchemist was published, which is a genre targeted at young, primarily tweenage boys. And as such, They focus predominantly on the violence. Everything is expressed through violence. If a character is good and admirable, they are also violent.
Hooray for violence!
This kind of bothers me. I can't help but feel like there are times, particularly when it comes to Izumi, where the need for violence because of genre sort of denigrates her character and limits how much we can appreciate the nuances of her personality, because she has a very interesting personality. She has an excellent motivation that mostly just gets expressed by her throwing knives at people.
Hey, if you can't express it through song or dance or talking, throw knives at people.
I mean, I suppose that I can't really talk because of my love of musicals requires that everyone express their feelings through song and dance. But
that was a joke, everyone. Do not throw knives at people. Do not. Anyone who's listening to this, I was just joking.
I'm not so sure. Our foreshadowing character scuttles off the roof, and we have our creepy music going do 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 on a low-pitched flute, which is beautiful and nice. I love it. And then immediately we shift gears because it's time to go to East City. And the soundtrack changes, and we have, instead of the music, we have this nice ambience track of birds chirping in the background. And it was something that I hadn't thought about before, but just noticed as I was watching this, that ambience can be just as effective at changing the tone of a scene as music. And if you use that to your advantage, you can use that to quickly and easily change between one extreme of emotion to another, which is exactly what this moment does so effectively, is to go from creepy and unnerving to calm and relaxed.
Okay.
In this scene that we transition to, Roy is playing chess with some old fuddy-duddy.
It's Lieutenant General Grumman, I think. Grumman. I can't
Is he
pronounce
ever
it.
going to be important again?
Yes.
Oh, okay. So this scene is important.
Yes.
Because my basic note for this entire scene was question mark actually important?
Yes, this is important.
It doesn't feel that important. I mean,
Well,
let me rephrase that. It certainly feels like it's trying to be more important than it's actually going to be. And here's where I think that Full Metal Alchemist shows the baggage that it carries in being a shonen, is because so much of the story has to be big and bombastic and larger than life. When it comes to something as tropified as two generals or two military leaders playing a game of chess, it's hard to tell if it's actually important or just another overblown scene.
it is kind of important. That's all you're getting from me.
But we do get at the end of this scene, in addition to Roy winning, which I'm sure is a metaphor for something if anybody wants to find it, he uses this to collect a few key people who I presume he is going to use to enact his search and spy in Central Command to figure out exactly what is going on here. With the exception of Riza, who we already know fairly well at this point, all of these characters that we're seeing in Roy's elite team are new. We know nothing about them other than
Well,
their names, which were
except for
rattled off
maybe
really
Gene
quickly.
Havoc. We know a little bit more about him.
Where do we know him from?
Dylan, are you serious? Team Rocket.
Oh, what? Team Rocket should not be on an elite team. From what I saw of him blundering through the first 12 episodes, I am not impressed, and I'm not quite sure what would have motivated Roy to be like, yeah, you did a terrible job with everything you've done so far, but I'm sure I can trust you with my next job.
That and apparently is also failed to keep a girlfriend, apparently, because like
Oh, was that the joke? He was the one who had to give up a girlfriend?
yeah. I think it was Gene Havoc. Yeah, I think it's Gene Havoc.
That's why. Oh, okay. That explains why that dumb joke was in there. The thing about Team Rocket is that they're so undistinguished in terms of character design. They look so much like just generic people within this show that it's really easy to forget what they look like. Next scene, Scar, bicep curling, because as we all know, bicep curling is the most effective exercise you can do if you want to get good at fighting. Forget about your core, forget about any sort of calisthenic exercise. It's all about the bicep curl.
Maybe he did it off screen.
I wonder if people realize how useless bicep curls are.
I'm guessing supposedly he's just doing that and then he's going to go on to another workout.
I only bring this up because it is a cliche that has no point behind it.
Except for maybe intimidation in some instances.
If your goal is to develop strength and power, bicep curls aren't really the best thing to go for. You can if you want, but there are much more effective exercises out there, most of them having to do with maneuvering your body. Bicep curls are mostly useful if you want to develop muscle mass, which some people want, but as a fighter, it's useless.
I mean, even if a person has muscles, they can still be taken down if someone knows what they're doing.
As a fighter, that muscle mass is just going to get in the way because it's more weight for you to carry around.
Yeah.
Two bulky guys come in and they're like, we're going to get you, Scar, and we're going to turn you in for a reward. Of course, we as an audience know they're dead, and we're just sort of waiting for the time when they will die, because that's going to happen. It's a fact.
Yeah, that was my thought too. I'm like, you two are unimportant characters. You're going to die.
Let me guess. Your name is Butch, and your name is Chad. Goodbye, Chad. Goodbye, Butch. Well, I'm not going to remember you 2 episodes from now.
There are no Chad and Butch. Rest in peace, Chad and Butch.
So Scar's teacher and master, who had come in earlier to talk to him, says to Scar, what would your brother think about this? And the camera has this dramatic shot of his tattoo, and then his robe covers it. And then it uncovers again to show us the tattoo at a slightly different angle. And all I wanted to say at this point is, we know that his brother is bonded to the tattoo. You don't have to lay it on any thicker. Don't you dare say a word, Timothy.
Okay, no comment.
At which point we then cut back to Dublith, where Al is sweeping the dirt road because, as we all know, even dirt has to be swept. And
even dirt has to be a little cleaner.
The foreshadowing character comes in and says, hey, wanna buy a watch? And he lures Al in over to the Devil's Nest, where there are other foreshadowing characters who are now actually characters. And one of them does this thing where he says, you're 14, you can make your own decisions. You can think for yourself and come to Pleasure Island. And the note that I have here is, don't ask him to think, because this is a shonen. Thinking in shonen means punching.
In this instance, he punches.
Into the Devil's Nest, we meet Greed, who has a very strong character design. I like the fact that he wears furs. I also like the fact that he doesn't wear a ton of fur. He wears just enough for us to get that this guy is vain and full of himself and wants to live lavishly.
He wants more.
He's a homunculus, an artificially made creature. Despite the fact that in actual historicity, homunculi were small people, in this world, it's an exaggeration and gross modification of historicity. So homunculi are just full-sized people in this world. Okay. And in comes the convenient demonstration hammer, so that they can demonstrate in the most graphic and illustrious way that he can't die. I hope that it comes back in the future.
It's also the convenient combat hammer. Like, he uses it to fight in the next episode.
Oh,
Greed,
that's a shame. I was hoping that it would just be used as a convenient demonstration hammer instead of a battle hammer. Oh well.
It's used as both.
Al realizes that his brother is gone and goes to find him at the Devil's Nest.
No, Ed realizes his brother is gone.
Yes.
Al has been captured, Dylan.
Al has 2 personalities. One of them happens to be a fish. So, Edward
happens to be a fish?
Meanwhile, Edward finds a little clue being like, hey, my brother was probably kidnapped and taken to the Devil's Nest. And he goes to meet them, where he is, of course, peeved about his brother being kidnapped. Greed throws out this line about how it would be much easier if they would just cooperate, to which I wrote the note, nah, bro, it would have been easier if you would have just cooperated, because you were the one who kidnapped his brother for no reason. Why in the world would you think that the best approach...
Plus, you've got that lizard spy. Why not just have the lizard spy on them while they figure out information?
I get the impression that Lizard Spy was super impatient because he was just like, I bet that this is one of the people we should be looking at. Even though, like, why else would he be looking at them if they weren't already deemed worthy of paying attention to? I don't know. It's needlessly complicated. Greed is kind of his own downfall in this instance. Commence fighting.
Commence fighting. Ready? Round 1.
During this battle, we cut to Izumi, who is now having her chance to conveniently find out that, oh, I should probably go to the Devil's Nest.
There's a party at the Devil's Nest. A party of death.
And Izumi is like, sweet, I'll go. The note that I have here is about building tension through contrast. We have two different tones here. We have dramatic and serious with Greed versus Edward, and we have kind of goofy and comedic with Izumi discovering that her peeps have flown the coop and now she's got to go get them. This is a great way of creating tension when you have two scenes that are both obviously going to build up and lead to each other, but which nonetheless have very different tones. And this is one of the things that I think that Full Metal Alchemist does spectacularly well, is that you can have humor and drama working together to build each other up to a heightened sensation, to a heightened moment when it finally climaxes at the end, where Izumi crashes through the party and says, I am a housewife. Yes,
and then
Izumi,
it kind of
yes,
just ends.
I feel like that ending was a little bit unsatisfying, but I also realized that this is an anime TV show with a strict constraint in terms of time. Sure. Final impressions or thoughts?
Oh, from me?
Yes.
From me?
Yes, you.
Enjoy. The episode was pretty good. I mean, it wasn't the best episode, but I was like, yeah, it's pretty good. I liked it.
I think that this episode would have felt better if it had been explicitly labeled as part 1 of 2, because it leads so naturally into the second episode, and we don't really get any sense of resolution until that second episode.
Yep.
Even the cliffhanger in this one feels sort of like, tune in next week when we actually finish what we set out to say here. As opposed to a typical episode, which even when it does have a cliffhanger, it usually feels like the end of the episode. It just happens to immediately beggar questions that can only be answered in the next one. In this case, we don't even know what the questions are going to be.
Will Izumi still be saying she's a housewife? Tune in next week to find out.
Izumi saying that she is a housewife is a powerful statement for her character, but it doesn't really beggar any questions, and so it doesn't really work as a cliffhanger. It feels powerful, and it feels great to hear her say that, because it's her proudly declaring, this is who I am, this is what I want to be identified with, which we kind of already knew from the previous episode, but it's just nice to see a woman fully embrace her identity that she wants to have, but it doesn't naturally lead to anything. Like when someone says, I am a housewife, what do you think is going to happen next? Nothing. Like nothing comes to mind. There's no, it doesn't spark the imagination. And so as powerful as it is and as satisfying as it is to hear it, it's not that great of a cliffhanger.
I mean, I kind of picture Izumi beating some poor fool up with a broom after she yells that, but that's just...
Which she probably would, because she's a resourceful mother. All right, well, it's been a pleasure, Timothy.
May the force be with you. Talk to you later. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.